Joining us in the studio now to discuss the issue in further detail, I would like to welcome the Honorable Minister of Health, Dr. Osagie Ehanire. Dr. Ehanire, pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
Good morning.
Okay. Also here with us in the studios, we would like to welcome Dr. Isaac Eboja. Eboja is a public health expert and a regular face on Good Morning Nigeria. Doc, pleasure to have you around.
Good morning.
Okay.
Okay, let's also welcome all the way from Kogi State, the State Commissioner for Health, Dr. Saka Haruna Audu. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
And from our Kano studios, we have Professor Isa Sadiq Abubakar. He is an epidemiologist and a member of the Kano State Action Committee on Health. Dr. Abubakar, thank you very much for joining us, or rather, Professor Abubakar.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay. All right. Well, gentlemen, once again, a pleasure to have you around. Let's begin with the Honorable Minister of Health. Honorable Minister, tell us, what is the situational report with regard to what has been described as perhaps a spike in the number of cases of Lassa Fever infections and fatalities this year already?
Well, the latest report confirms about 258 cases with 41 fatalities in 19 states. There is a reduction in what we call the case fatality rate. That is the number of people who survive or rather who do not survive the illness. A couple of years ago, it used to be up to 30%. The fatality is now 15%. Which shows that more people survive. The doctors who handle this treatment are learning better how to do it.
And what do we know about the location of occurrence? Is it in the rural areas or in the urban areas?
Well, it's anywhere. The vector is the multi-mammate rat, which is known to invade houses, also go into the bush and drop viruses through feces and urine on food that's left uncovered. So that can be anywhere, both in the city and rural areas. There's no discrimination there.
Honorable Minister, I know you have said that the case fatality dropped, and the statistics, as I heard yesterday from sister stations, dropped from 19.7% in 2019 to about 15.9% this year. But regardless, it's spreading like, Hamilton fire, like Hamilton wind. And one, keeps wondering why a case that originated with us, it originated from here. It has its origin here in Nigeria. Why, for my whole lifetime, for 50 years, it hasn't, we've not been able to find a cure. I mean, why is that? Do we have any gap in surveillance and detection, in management?
Well, in the first place, it was discovered. Discovered means science became aware of it. It doesn't mean it hasn't been there before. It probably has been there, unrecognized, unnamed, and probably unclassified. And with most disease patterns, it's like that. It took a long time before science discovered what causes malaria. They just thought it was the air. And that's why they called it malaria, bad air. They thought it was the air in the humid air in the tropical region until the disease agent was discovered. So in the same way, the virus that causes Lassa fever was discovered at a certain point, and since then science has learned more and more and more about it, and able to discover more and more. A lot of people who normally will have lost their lives quietly somewhere are now being found to actually have been passed away through the Lassa virus infection. So science is gradually knowing more about it and being able to find more cases, treat more cases, and also heal more people.
It was discovered, to use your word now, sometime in 1969. That's what we're told, in Lassa and Borno State. So between 1969 and now, it's over 50 years?
Yes, it is. Yes, correct.
It's over 50 years?
Yeah, correct.
So in 50 years, we're still having the spread, to so many states across Nigeria. Because, like you said, how many states? Over 19 states?
About 19 states
Yes,
are involved
so-
now, yes. There is this virus is apparently endemic to West Africa, and it's a vector. It's carried by the vector called the rat, and the multi-mammid rat. But again, as I said, many cases are being discovered, which will have been previously just classified as, oh, the man had fever and passed, or malaria. They will have thought it was malaria or something. But now we're able to identify. We have 5 laboratories now that can tell you exactly that this is Lassa fever infection. Before now, they didn't know what it was. They would have just classified it as malaria. So it's the improvement that allows science to identify what exactly is the cause of death for any person who died of a fever.
So we're making improvements.
We are making improvement.
I was
There's
just wondering,
progress.
does your explanation also suffice for what we are seeing now in the spread out of the areas of occurrence? Because in the past, you could identify only perhaps a few states to say, well, once the outbreak occurs on a yearly basis, there are a few states you could readily name. Ekpoma area in Edo State, for instance, always popped up, parts of Borno and elsewhere in the country. But as it were, it appears that no part of the country is virtually immune. You have it in the west, in the north, in the east, and then in the south.
You're correct. No part is immune, but there are areas where you have high concentration. There are epicenters, and that's in Nigeria. 89% of all the cases have occurred in 3 states: Ebonyi, Edo, and Ondo, and the sporadic outbreaks are in other states. And the result of that is that doctors and nurses in states where it occurs frequently are faster to identify that this might be something suspicious. Somebody comes with a fever, you treat for malaria, which is the most endemic of all illnesses. And if they don't get better, what next? So doctors who see a lot of these cases are quick to identify. But those who don't see it a lot will say, might think, well, probably this medicine is work for malaria. Let's try another one. So you have a delay before there is, before the penny drops. We call that the index of suspicion, and it's a normal thing that if doctors see a lot of one case, they recognize it quicker, and if they don't see it often, they don't immediately recognize it. It doesn't hit them that this is something different. So that's what happens in some states where it pops up, and it takes a while before they realize that this is Lassa fever. Here in Edo and Ondo, the main treatment area in Nigeria now, Center of Excellence, is in Irua, and there they are very fast in treatment and diagnosis.
Lassa fever is, I don't know, it's as deadly as it was Ebola, and we were able to, nip Ebola, before it did any, damage to us. So my question will be, in terms of speed of containment, what is our progress so far?
Well, there is progress on several fronts. They belong to the same family, the viral hemorrhagic fevers, the Ebola and the Lassa fever. But while we know more about one or the other, the response is different. For example, we know that Lassa fever is carried by a vector. About the Ebola, that's not too clear what exactly it is. They say the green monkey, but that's not too very clear. So what we know about both is not necessarily the same. And for Lassa, we have medicine that we actually use, ribavirin, which is actually given and which helps. For Ebola, it's supportive treatment, but most of the time, research is going on all of it, and there's progress on vaccines against Lassa, which is being done in collaboration with IRWA and foreign researchers.
Yes, at the moment, sorry, Honorable Minister, what I'm saying is, can we confidently say that we have contained it so that it doesn't spread we don't record further spread to other parts of the country?
Well, I won't put it as a spread because it's there, it occurs, and if it's carried by a vector, and the vector during the dry season begins to invade homes when food is scarce, that's when you see more cases. In the rainy season, when they have more food in the bush, because there's invasion of homes by rodents, so you don't get. So it's a seasonal problem, which spikes during dry season. And this is linked to the behavior of rodents. So the presence in all states potentially is there, but the concentration is different. So to say it's spreading is not accurate, no.
Okay, well, remember, Mr. We'll pause you in the meantime, and then we'll return subsequently to issues relating to research, vaccine, and availability of treatment at various locations. Let's bring in now the Honorable Commissioner for Health in Kogi State, Dr. Saka Audu. Dr. Audu, what is the situation with regard to Lassa fever in your state, if any?
Thank you very much. Lassa fever is not new to us in Nigeria, likewise in Kogi State. So when the previous government came on board in 2016, we recognized that first, and we established a dedicated center, Lassa Fever Treatment Center. We went ahead in 2017 and established a laboratory, biosafety laboratory, dedicated to the treatment center to avoid contamination of sample. And recently, we acquired PCR machine in Zonal Hospital, Okene. So we are fully prepared. In the weeks to come. We'll be discussing with NCDC to see how this machine could be calibrated, standardized for detection of this virus. So
does Kogi have any confirmed case?
Yes, we have recorded up to 23 suspected cases, 4 of which were confirmed to be Lassa fever cases, and we sadly recorded 2 deaths, which are about a 50% fatality rate. But honestly, with our sensitization program via mass media, social media, and social contact using the traditional method, we now see people who present themselves for Lassa fever exclusion willingly. So the people have taken heed of our campaign, and I'm sure that we have, to some extent, to some level, contained the disease.
Well, for the benefit of our viewers, give us a sense of what you have, and excuse me, and where you have those facilities. If people are presenting themselves, maybe a man is in Lokoja, does he go to Kenya to go and present himself? If it's in Ajakuta, where does he go to?
Okay, the first case we recorded was in Ida local government area. You know, this season, the spread of virus actually started from Edo State. So in Ida local government, we have a border with Edo State via a community called Aganagbode, and they share common market. So that's our suspicion. But you know, majority of the people that are infected do not present with symptoms. Up to 80% of them do not present with symptoms. It could be very difficult to identify those who were infected with this deadly virus. We also had 2 cases from Ibaji local government area and 1 from Okene local government area. The second case, which is from Okene local government, died immediately because the woman was in her 3rd trimester. We all know that the virus is very deadly when there is a pregnancy, especially in 3rd trimester, with case fertility rate of up to 80%. So that's actually the sad part of it. We lost a mother with the fetus.
But basically, what have you been able to isolate in terms of contact? Is it person-to-person contact, or is it food poisoning? What have been the means of infection?
Well, it's somehow very difficult, as I've mentioned earlier. We have communities where people share same market with a state who is for some time now known to be very endemic for the disease. So we cannot, cone down that particular case to be an index case or spread from person to person. So it's technically difficult, But however, because of our suspicion, we have increased our campaign. In fact, we have taken to the traditional method, engaging the town criers, and that has helped significantly.
Okay, we'll get to the content of your campaign presently, but let's bring in Dr. Isaac Eboja. Well, tell us, what are the clinical issues surrounding Lassa fever?
Well, before we go to the clinical issue, let's look at the epidemiological issue, since you raised that with the Honorable Minister. One of the problems we have, and the reason why it looks as if nothing has been done or is being done, is because in the past, the ability to move items, food items, from one state to the other was not as much as we have today. For example, if a rat urinates or defecates on rice, as an example, on beans, and that beans is carried from Kaduna State to Port Harcourt to be sold there, the infection may arise there, but the origin of it is from Kaduna. We have more of food transportation between states now. We have more of movement of people between states now than we used to have in the past. I'm trying to answer one of the reasons why in the past we didn't have this much Lassa fever is the perception. It is not correct. We used to have those problems. One of the problems one of the reasons, like the Honorable Minister said, was that the diagnosis was not properly done. People didn't know what it was. And not only Lassa fever. You discover that in our own environment here, fever, for example, becomes a problem of almost everything that affects us. Malaria. Now we're talking of Lassa fever. We are talking of coronavirus, Ebola. Any of these things, especially those diseases that are caused by viruses, come with fever. And so even if you are a doctor, and a patient walks in with fever, it does not help you to know what exactly that fever is caused by. You would need to do a laboratory test in some cases before you'll be able to arrive at a definitive diagnosis or knowledge of what the problem is. Now, clinically, there are labs now that samples are sent to for analysis so that we will know exactly whether it is Lassa fever or not. And the treatment now is much better than in the past. The drug, ribavirin, which is being used, wasn't even available at the beginning because nobody knew about it. And if it was only in few places. Now we have more of it. And this is one of the reasons why the case fatality is seemingly dropping. And also the knowledge of the public is increasing just a little bit. Not much, not as much as we would want to. And the knowledge of the health staff in various places is also increasing. Part of this knowledge is coming from experience. You have one case that presents like this, and therefore, at the back of your mind, when you see another, you begin now to suspect. Of course, that's part of our medical training. Anybody that comes in, for example, with fever, your computer in the brain begins to scan through what could be the reason for this fever. Could it be malaria? Could it be this? Could it be that? Could it be that? Somebody comes in and is coughing. You wonder, what is causing this cough? What did you eat? When did it start? All those questions that doctors or nurses ask help them to know where the problem started, how it started, and what it could be.
All right, Dr. Eboja, thank you. Let's bring in Professor Issa Abubakar from our Kano studio. Prof, let's assume that, of course, while you are giving us your opening remarks or your opening views about this issue, assuming that the index contact is, say, rice, for instance, a bag of rice, as Dr. Isaac Eboja has indicated, and it is exposed to a particular temperature, can the virus still survive?
Well, viruses actually in most cases survive in living animals. So in this case, we are talking about the natural reservoir of the illness is Mastomys natalensis, a multimammate rat, although some studies have shown that other variants of rodents can also help in transmitting the virus. However, outside the human body, viruses do not last long. Some of the literature I've read on Lassa virus indicated that it can stay outside the human body or living animal for up to like 54 minutes. So certainly, from the literature we've been reading also, we are encouraged to be cooking food items very well before we consume them. That means the viruses, when exposed to certain temperatures that are high, will probably not survive. But still, a lot needs to be understood from further studies on the properties of the virus.
Well, Professor Abubakar, tell us what you know about the spread out, if you like, of Lassa fever around the country. I mean, Kano, for instance, was hardly ever in the news in the past, but this year there have been reported fatalities of medical personnel. This relates, of course, to safety of healthcare workers. So what is likely happening?
Well, apparently the epidemic in Kano started when an index case came to Kano, and we were caught unawares because nobody expected it to have occurred. Actually, the stories have it that one of the women that resides in Kano traveled to a neighboring state, and then when she came back, she came down with an illness. She first presented to a private clinic in Kano here, where she was a pregnant woman and she was almost term. But because she could not afford the cost of medication there, she had to be transferred to the Apex Hospital, that is the Aminu Kano Teaching Hospital. And doctors who provided care for her, specifically they operated on her and removed out the baby. Unfortunately, both the woman and her yet unborn child died. Up to that time, nobody knew that a certain case of Lassa fever existed. Days passed by, and one of the doctors who provided care for this woman, a young house officer in her early 20s, lost her life. Still, it wasn't a story. The story began to come to light when on 20th of January, one of the anesthetists we have in Aminu Kano Teaching Hospital, a very dedicated staff, a very compassionate person, died early in the morning on Monday 20th. And because the funeral was attended by so many people from different walks of life, and then many people interacted with the corpse, and hours after he has been buried, then the story began to shape, because one other doctor who actually performed the surgery himself was already on admission in the teaching hospital. And when doctors went to see him and he heard about this death, he was able to now connect the death of these people who have died earlier while providing services with his own illness. And so it now became clear that 3 people who were involved in managing this index case or suspected case of a woman actually developed illness, and 2 of them have died. Then it now remains who were the other people in the theater around that time, and it so happened that one of the scrub nurses When we looked for his whereabouts, it was said that he had traveled to Birnin Kudu in Jigawa State, already with an illness, a febrile illness. So an ambulance was sent because we made connection with the chief medical director of FMC Birnin Kudu, who was able to send his men to locate the whereabouts of this our staff. And then the staff was brought back to Kano that same day, and a decision was quickly taken to transfer him to the isolation center in Ergaya here in Kano State. Now, with that, the Ministry of Health was alerted, and the Honorable Commissioner for Health in Kano State now reactivated the State Emergency Preparedness and Response Committee with members drawn from different hospitals and parastatal MDAs of the State Ministry of Health, as well as the teaching hospital, the Dala National Orthopedic Hospital, Dala, partners in the state, the University Health Services, and so many other stakeholders. NCDC was alerted, and then the epidemic containment began with a lot of activities carried out trying to limit the spread of the query epidemic. One thing that was done immediately was to take sample of the anesthetist who had died that on Monday 20th, because we still had his own blood sample, and then the blood sample of the main surgeon, a gynecologist who performed the surgery, who was still ill in Aminu Kano Teaching Hospital that time. And then the blood sample was taken and sent to the lab. These two samples were sent to Abuja reference lab, and the following day we received the report which confirmed that the cases were both Lassa fever. So now the picture was almost complete, because those who have lost their lives had some connection with a suspected woman who had pregnancy, and in her history, when we reviewed her case, it was indicated at the time of admission in Aminu Kano Teaching Hospital that she was from that private clinic, and she was transferred, although due to financial reasons, but her social history indicated that she went to nurse her mom in the neighboring state who had died, and her husband was ill as at that time. And stories we had when it was followed up, the story concerning this woman indicated that more people have lost their lives, and these people were related to her. They lived in and around her house. So it's like the picture was painted well, that people have lost their lives as a result of contact with this woman.
Okay, Prof, thank you. Thank you. I'm tempted to still stay with you, but this is a question that probably maybe Dr. Isaac Abuja and, of course, the minister would also take, because Dr. Audu here had already said before that it's very, very difficult to track down the points of contact, whether it's from the index or secondary or whatever. But from what you have told us, the virus cannot survive, outside, the human body or the vector for, more than an hour or thereabout, 54 minutes, you said. So we can conveniently rule out, say, okay, food, or consumables, because these are exposed to very high temperature. They are cooked, they're boiled before, being consumed. Maybe person to person, or probably those who have died have either consumed the vector, which is the rats themselves directly, or so. But my question really is, if that is the case, why are we finding it difficult to handle, Lassa fever cases when they break out? Does it show our preparedness?
Actually, let me correct an impression. It's not like food items cannot be vehicles for the transmission of this illness. But people are encouraged to cook the food items properly, simply because the cooking raises the temperature high to such an extent that probably the viruses die. But then food items that rats or the rodents live on or had some contact with, if we consume them, definitely it is one of the ways that the illness can easily be transferred. That is why people are being called upon not to leave their food overnight and then in the morning they will want to consume them. Or people are discouraged from taking food items that have not been cooked. But definitely the disease gets transferred through food items just as well as if there is very close contact with a person who has had the illness. Or because if body fluid of such a person touches an uninfected person, it is another way that the disease can spread. Similarly, when the person has interaction with items being used by an infected person, especially one that is symptomatic, like the beddings, the mattresses where this person has lied down, and the clothing of such a person, or in the case of a corpse, when one interacts with the corpses with body secretions probably coming out even after the death of such an individual, one is at risk of contracting the illnesses. And then some literatures, of course, have talked about transmission of the illness by aerosol, by droplets, that is through inhalation. So all these are known cases. But especially in places where the disease is endemic, the rodents' saliva, rodents' blood, urine and feces are well-known vehicles for transmitting the illness, the products that help in transmitting the viruses.
Professor Abubakar, thank you very much. There's something, I don't know, Claire, your question is still pending, but there's something I would like us to drill down further into, and both the Honorable Minister and then the other guests here with us in the studios. From what Professor Abubakar is describing, there are clear similarities between, shall we say, the means of transmission of Ebola virus and Lassa fever. Because when we had the case of Patrick Sawyer in 2014 coming to Nigeria, there were all kinds of analysis regard to this, that, contact with a cadaver that had, of course, of a person who had Lassa fever with the bedding, with the clothing, and then with all kinds of utensils, would seem to be, a vehicle for transmitting the virus from one person to the other. Is this what we are seeing now with regard to Lassa fever, and therefore the kind of necessary precaution that we ought to take? Because considering the narrative provided by Professor Abubakar, it seems that once you trace the cycle, many more persons probably will just be in their grave without knowing what killed them.
Well, that's true. That's why contact tracing is a very important part of responding to these infections. You find out who they've been in contact with, particularly within the family and friends and circle of where they work. And some of the concerns are, for example, if you have been in a bus or in a crowded place, then of course there's a lot of risk that happens in there. But these are infections that go in ways that are unseemly. You don't, first of all, you have to know that there is a problem with that person. And if you don't know, then you don't, of course, have that precaution. Don't take any precautions. But if you know, then you can put on gloves and put on protective equipment. But the infection can take place in very simple ways. If, for example, you have been in contact with a person through the maybe sweat or saliva or any way, and maybe you unconsciously touch your eyes or the mucosa or your nose, you don't, those are some reflex movements that you make. You have already infected yourself in a way that you don't know. It looks very benign, but it happens. So science is still trying to find out more and more how this occurs and how it happens. Above all, science is also trying to find out how to deal with it through medicines and vaccines.
It is that dealing with it, Dr. Boja. You had my earlier question, yes, to the Prof. It is the dealing with it now that I'm concerned about.
I understand your question.
Yes.
And this also goes back to the first statement that I made. People are moving from one part of the country to the other, from one community to the other. Don't forget, we keep saying that this disease is spread through two vectors. The real vector is the rat, but it is a zoonotic disease, meaning it occurs in both human beings and animals. So now, the more people move around from where there's an infection and where they have had a contact with an infected person to another place, the more likely they would take that disease from that place to the new place where they have gone. This reminds me, one of the things that we should be doing, and I would want the public to please try to listen to this. If today, for example, I'm giving an example, the minister says, stop going to crowded areas like the markets, like the mosques, like the churches, or any place where there are lots of people. If, for example, such a announcement is made, the public should please try to cooperate. Such statements would not be made for flimsy reasons. There must have to be a reason why somebody like the minister, for example, would say something like that, because that is a warning that there's a possibility that if you go to such a place, a particular disease, I'm not talking of Lassa fever alone, we're having coronavirus that is spreading now, and we are praying that it doesn't come here.
We don't have it.
Yes.
No, we don't have it.
I know we don't.
Yes, they have it.
Yes, and we are praying that it doesn't come here. But one of the things that we must never do is to say, I'm okay. And the problem is those people's problem. In today's world, you cannot say so.
So what, quickly, Dr. Boja, so what should we be doing now with regards to, of course, curtailing it, preventing it? We don't have a vaccine yet, and a lot of people are still dying. So what should we be doing at the moment? What should be the message?
The message, sensitization, health education, mobilization, and listening carefully to the real problem. What is the problem? The problem is rats defecating and urinating on food items. 1. 2, infected persons having contact with others, spreading body secretions, saliva, urine, blood with others. These are kinds of things that everybody must have to listen to and try to avoid. If, for example, let me say this before I forget. One of the reasons why we are seeing a sparked case of Lassa fever now is because it's dry season and bushes are burnt. This is where these rats reside. You are driving them from their homes and you are burning their food where they reside. So they are coming out.
Is it made worse by the climate change issue?
Yes, of course. Of course. But climate change is gradual. This one is more dramatic. Okay. If you notice, this month, last month and this month in particular, there has been a lot of bush burning. And so rats are coming out from where they were hiding and looking for where to eat and where to stay. And naturally, they stay with human beings.
All right, that's an environmental factor. I just wonder, Dr. Saka Audu, what are the manifest symptoms of Lassa fever? I mean, we say fever, I mean, we all have fever from time to time. What are those fevers that ultimately, diagnosis will show as fever? And I used the Ebola analogy a while ago. We know in some cases we're bleeding from all kinds of orifices in the body in Ebola. Do we also have that in Lassa fever?
Thank you very much. That is true.
What is
just
true?
as that bleeding highlights the the diagnosis of Lassa fever. Once you start seeing bleeding in a febrile case, you must raise your index of suspicion. As the name suggests, Lassa fever. Fever is the hallmark. Then, the following week, the incubation period is usually from 2 to 21 days. You begin to have generalized body ache, malaise, myalgia, that is a pain in the muscles, and in extreme cases when you begin to have bleeding from orifices, from the nose, from the ear, from the mouth, people who don't bleed from the gum before will begin to, following just brushing.
This is associated with Lassa fever?
Yes, that's Lassa fever. So at that point, a clinician managing such case must raise his or her index of suspicion and must call for help.
Thank you. So we'll just give the minister the last word. Minister, in just a few minutes, this is a multifaceted issue. So who are the other stakeholders that are collaborating, and how much of sensitization are you doing?
Well, in first place, a lot of social and behavior change communication is important. People who dry their food out on the street, for example, put their food out where rats and lizards can partake of the food. And secondly, there's the environmental issue about sanitation, what attracts rodents and rats into your homes. And thirdly, within the families, food hygiene. Are you covering your food properly? Are you cooking it properly? Are you protecting your family and your sources of food, your bag of rice or your bag of beans? So those are all issues that are not medical, they are all social. So we need social and behavior change communication to take care of that aspect. And then for those who manage an outbreak, once you treat and you do not see an improvement, have that suspicion that this could be something more. Sent to a hospital, have a test done, and then the earlier you get to the hospital, the faster the treatment can be and the better the outcomes.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, because in terms of social and behavior change, so that in trying to solve one problem, we don't get into another, to say that, okay, rat droppings and urine on raw food items could lead to contamination, so that if you are selling beans or rice or other food or garri, don't go and start using sniper, to say you want to preserve those things. I think that's one campaign that we had sometime in the past. Don't go and start using sniper or to say you want to use all kinds of things
to
drive away rats. Those things are also poisonous to the human body.
But I think sniper has been banned. The sale of public sale of snipers.
Open sale. People may have access to it. The other point, Honorable Commissioner, we hope that you take back to your state along with your colleagues. We want to see more action at the subnational level. Environmental sanitation. If rats are the cause of this, a rat will not just manifest in a place that is not filthy or that is not dirty. How much of sanitation do we have at the subnational levels? Those are matters that, of course, you'll have time to deal with. So on that note, we'd like to thank we have a number of tweets.
But, yes, I think we could just read out.
I don't know if the producer...
Fritz Simeon, Otolo Sunday, Titus Monday, Joseph, Chidi Amadi, Bola Nuga, Dele Jack Solomon, Akeju, most of our regular tweeters, if there's a word like that, I have sent into it. We'd like to appreciate all of you. Thank you. And so, Kingsley, as you started.
Yeah, we would like to thank all our guests for being with us this morning. Dr. Saka Audu, Honorable Commissioner for Health, Kogi State. Thanks a lot for being around. Okay. Our appreciation also to Dr. Isaac Aboja, public health expert and regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria. Thanks a lot for being with us this morning.
You're welcome.
From Kano, our network center there, we're joined by Professor Isa Sadiq Abubakar. Professor, I would like to thank you also for the insights you gave to us as to what happened in Kano, and I wish, of course, the very best to the health professionals in that locale. Thank you very much once again for being with us. And here in the Abuja studios, our deep appreciation to the Honorable Minister of Health, Dr. Osage Hanire. Thanks a lot for being with us on the program this morning.
My pleasure.
Okay. All right, we'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll get ahead with the second item for our discussion, which has to do with this Finance Act 2020.